first strange port of Dead Rising is the cell phone version. I can only find so little footage of it to begin with since people stopped owning cell phones like this a long time ago. It looks kinda like Zombies Ate My Neighbors, except terrible. There would also be an iOS game years later that uses the setting from the first game. It looks a lot like those Resident Evil iOS games. And just like those games, it has shitty controls, so I'm definitely not interested. You can play as 4 different characters: Frank, Jesse, Brad, and Carlito. Don't know what they changed in the gameplay since I can't find any real footage of them. Now for one of the strangest ports I've ever witnessed: Dead Rising Chop Till You Drop. So how could they possibly port this game that pushed 360 to its early limits with its ridiculous crowd clearing gameplay and 800 zombies on screen? Well, for one, they toned it down to just 100 zombies, and they no longer use the MT Framework engine, and instead use the Resident Evil 4 engine. With that, it plays very similar to Resident Evil 4, and Frank even reloads exactly the same way Leon does. Seriously, frame by frame. There isn't much else to say, except everything looks blotchy, it's not time-based as a whole anymore, there's less survivors, the mall is much smaller, you can't jump, there's little to no exploring, you can't take photos, and it's not really worth playing if you already have the original game. I will say though, it has one of the best goddamn trailers I've ever seen. But enough of this garbage, let's move on to Dead Rising, the movie. Or Zombreck's Dead Rising Sun. This was a movie directed by Keiji Inafune himself, and oh boy, he's definitely not cut out for movies.
Invited you to the party. Shut up, you big pussy.
Something about a kid and his handicapped brother trying to find shelter while the outbreak is occurring, and oh.
Get up! Hurry!
I'm sure some people would say it's the English dub that truly makes this painful, but I think it just adds needed laughs, making the movie slightly more bearable.
You'll be shocked when you see the size of my massive cock. I'm gonna ram all 12 inches down your fucking throat.
Okay, fuck this movie, let's go back to the games. So, 3 years pass and no new Dead Rising installment. I remember seeing Capcom announce that stupid Wii port and thinking, okay, how about Dead Rising 2? It would not be until February of 2009 that we would finally get a glimpse of the new sequel. There was first a viral video with no description of any sort, then a reveal trailer a couple days later. And it looked pretty sick. It presented one new mechanic to the gameplay, combining items to make devastating weapons. Dead Rising 2 would not hit shelves until September of 2010, but a month before that it received a small downloadable prequel title exclusive to Xbox 360. This would be called Case Zero. In Case Zero, you play as Chuck Green, who has his 4-year-old daughter Katie. The prequel occurs 3 years before the main game. They just escaped an outbreak that occurred in Las Vegas, but not before Katie's mom became a zombie and bit her.
Daddy, why did Mommy bite me?
That wasn't Mommy, sweetheart. It just looked like her.
Chuck seems to be doing well enough for himself and his daughter, but this jerk steals his truck that has all of his supplies.
That's my truck! Stop! Son of a bitch!
The Zombrex.
They become stranded in a town called Still Creek, and now Chuck has to worry about Katie turning, so he has to continue being well supplied with the pharmaceutical suppressor known as Zombrex, which only lasts 12 hours. Chuck hears on a radio that the military has planned to quarantine the entire area surrounding Las Vegas in a 50-mile radius.
A new quarantine with full security detail will be there at 2100 hours. Repeat, backup will be there by nightfall.
Stowe Creek is only 46 miles away from Vegas, so Chuck has until nightfall to come up with a quick plan to escape this town with his daughter. He finds some cart full of pieces to a bike. When he takes it back to the garage they are using as a safe house, he decides to find the parts he needs to build the working motorcycle. After all, Chuck is quite the handyman, which plays on the new concept of combining weapons. You find all the parts of the bike before nightfall and give Katie the Zombrix she needs, but this mechanic shows up and notices that. He says she's a zombie just waiting to happen and wants to kill her for his collection.
Zombies are good hunting, son. Kinda like shooting people, but without all the legal hassle.
Chuck doesn't take kindly to that, so it's boss battle time. And that's it for him. As the military arrives, Chuck and Katie escape off on his makeshift motorcycle away from the quarantine zone. Later on, Chuck comes across the asshole who stole his ride, but now he's dead. Chuck takes his items he left in the truck, and they ride off.
Honey, listen to me. We made it this far. I will not stop until you're safe. Nothing is more important than that. You understand? Let's get going.
There was also 2 extra endings, one where Chuck gets captured by the military and Katie gets taken away from him, and another where Katie is zombified. I would talk a lot about the gameplay, but since the core of it is identical to the full retail game, I'll save it for that. The cool thing about this prequel chapter was that the experience you gain, money you earn, Zombrix you collect, transfer over to Dead Rising 2 on Xbox 360, and you got some exclusive items for playing it. So not only did you get a taste of what the full game will be, you get a head start in the retail title story mode. It's a lot like what Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes is to Phantom Pain, except Case Zero wasn't a complete fucking ripoff. Hey, Case Zero, Ground Zeroes, odd coincidence. That's Case Zero. It was such a tease for me since I first finished it on the same day I started. It really made me look forward to the next big installment even more. 1 month later, Dead Rising 2 would be released in September of 2010. No longer an exclusive series, this title was released on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 the same day, with a PC version mere days later. It would also not be solely developed by Capcom Production Studio 1. The development of Dead Rising 2 would be mainly outsourced to a Canadian company known as Blue Castle Games. Before Dead Rising 2, they made a few baseball games. Inafune was brought down to merely being executive producer and Kawano executive director. It's safe to assume they had much less control than in the first title's development. So how did Blue Castle do, making a highly anticipated sequel? Long before its release, rumors were saying that the sequel to Dead Rising would take place in an island resort. I can see that being kind of a cool idea, but later on rumors were leading toward it taking place in Las Vegas. In the final build, your playground would be this gigantic strip, similar to the famous Vegas location. This setting would be dubbed Fortune City. Every single type of store in the Willamette Shopping Center, except the hardware store, is represented in Fortune City, and there's a ton of new kinds of stores as well. It's also significantly bigger than all of Willamette. No joke, it's easy as hell to get lost at first. Let's take a look. You got 2 small malls, an unfinished mall, this practically covers all of Willamette already, an arena entrance, a hotel lobby, 3 casinos, a food court, and a big spine all across the center that connects all of these areas, as well as features its own stores across the sides. I couldn't believe how gigantic this place was. I thought Willamette was big already. Even so, I expected the sequel to let you explore an entire city, but that idea was tabled for a later time. Besides shopping around for items and looking at real Playboy ads, there's also some minigames you can play as well. How's the gameplay itself? Well, almost everything from the first game makes a comeback. Explore the areas, use anything you can find as a weapon, rescue survivors, level up for upgrades as well as new means of attacking, and of course destroying zombies, which are everywhere. Oh, and remember how they boasted having 800 zombies at once in Dead Rising 1? They raised it up to 7,000 for this game. That's a lot of blood, a lot of guts, and probably the reason they sacrificed a consistent frame rate from the first game. They also seem to have made guns somewhat more scarce in this game, as well as significantly weaker, but health ups are more common to find. Also, the photography system has been removed. I guess since Chuck isn't a journalist, it wouldn't make much sense for him to randomly take pictures. Infinity mode did not make a return either, so the only way to explore the mall was within the story mode. The PP system is pretty much the same. Leveling up upgrades you one way or another. Sometimes you get 2 bonuses from leveling up. More health, more inventory, new combo cards, and special moves that aren't really as cool as Frank's, but still effective. So what exactly is new? Well, the controls were completely revamped in order to make sense. It's much easier to shoot, drive, and control it yourself. Just like how the first game mixed up the enemy types with cultists and special forces, this game has looters, some mercenaries, and even what I can only describe as super zombies. They show up late into the game, but they are significantly faster than regular zombies, don't die from breaking queen wasps near it, have projectile vomit that can stun you, and deal a lot more damage. The AI system has been greatly improved as well. Rescuing survivors is much easier this time, and giving them a weapon isn't a horrible idea anymore. You still have to give them your attention every once in a while, but they can really hold their own more often. Speaking of AI, the bosses this time around are somewhat tougher. Still, that doesn't mean learning a couple tricks won't give you the ultimate upper hand against most of them. There is also a money system. You learn early on that there are looters in Fortune City that opened up a few shops and sell particular items, some which can only be found in their shops. You can earn money by saving certain survivors, picking them up off the floor in some areas, and playing the minigames scattered around Fortune City.
Check.
You also have the concept of combining weapons, of course. Spread across Fortune City are these maintenance rooms, and in these rooms you are able to combine select items into new weapons capable of serious damage. Also, there's ways to collect what they call combo cards, which show you the combination of each weapon, and having that card of the combination you're using grants you a new move with it. There's also the multiplayer aspect. One of them is co-op mode. You can go through the entire story mode with a friend after the prologue. Player 2 plays as a clone of Chuck with their current level and moveset. Zombie slaying is even more fun with another human player on your side. Besides co-op, you can also play with others in Terror is Reality, or TIR. TIR is a game show in the world that uses zombies as part of all these strange courses that usually revolve around killing as many as possible. It really feels like a combination of Mad World as well as Fusion Frenzy. This mode is online only and up to 4 players. Each of you go head to head in 4 different obstacle courses, and any cash you earn in these games can be transferred to your story mode file. So that's the gameplay. As for the story, it's different from the first in various ways. 5 years have passed since the Willamette outbreak. Frank West is nowhere to be found. This time you play as Chuck Green, ex-motocross star, now contestant of a game show known as Terror is Reality, hosted by Tyrone King, and filmed in Fortune City, a huge casino strip. This one contestant decides to be a dick to you right before things get started.
Buddy, I heard you lost your wife in Vegas. I guess you suck at killing zombies, otherwise she'd still be around!
Backstage on a TV, he learns about a group of activists known as Citizens of Undead Rights Equality, or CURE.
Stacy Forsyth, the leader of the Nevada branch of CURE, had this to say.
Let our government know we will not stand for their systematic neglect of the infected. We must take drastic action now!
Something about them demanding zombies be treated more fair and not for sport like in TIR. Which is stupid, but I guess I don't know how people in real life would treat something like this if it actually were to happen. Then those assistants from TIR make fun of Chuck because they're also assholes.
A little disappointed in your performance tonight, Chuck. But you must get that a lot.
Then zombies break into backstage and everyone is panicking. Chuck hurries to find and rescue Katie, and they head to an emergency shelter where they meet Sullivan, who notices Katie's condition.
Listen, it's an existing condition, all right? It's okay, it happened a long time ago.
It's only a matter of time before she turns.
He lets Chuck know the military is going to come and quarantine the area in 3 days. Chuck also meets Stacy, who gives him a radio and says she'll inform him of any news or events through it. Later on, Chuck learns that someone is framing him as the perpetrator of the outbreak in Fortune City.
Initial reports suggest that the man in the video is former motocross champion Chuck Green.
What?
Not only that, but the reporter says that Chuck was led by CURE to cause this. Now he has a whole new mess of problems to deal with. He needs to find a way to prove his innocence. Chuck finds Rebecca Chang, who is reporting the story of Chuck causing the outbreak. He decides to help Rebecca get into a security room that could have real evidence on the ordeal. But all of the footage was destroyed, Sabotage. Sullivan was pissed because he also saw Chuck's framing and believes it. Chuck compromises with him, saying that he intends to search for evidence to clear his name by the time the military come to rescue him. If he doesn't, he'll surrender to the authorities. Stacy and Rebecca immediately don't get along since Kira is being accused of causing the ordeal as well. After exploring a bit and fighting a few psychopaths, including that guy in TIR who was a dick to you, Stacy sees something happening in the underground tunnels. Chuck decides to head there and he finds Kanye with a group of mercenaries moving equipment onto the train. He tells Chuck that he is the one who framed him and gets away. Stacy then spots mercenaries breaking into casino vaults in Fortune City, but Chuck gets to the groups in time to stop them, foiling Kanye's plan.
Damn it! What do I pay you people for?
Rebecca catches up with Chuck so she can be more suggestive, and she also agrees to let Chuck meet her source for her scoops.
I'll meet you at 11 o'clock in the bar at the Yucatan.
It's a date.
Her source ends up being the twins from TIR, who have Rebecca tied up and are here to also be suggestive and utter more innuendos.
Can't get it up. You don't have much stamina. Look, he's getting limp. I knew you would finish up fast. You'll be a different kind of stiff in a minute.
After defeating them, Chuck helps out Rebecca, who informs Chuck about a chopper coming to pick up TK at sunset.
He's getting whatever money he can still get his hands on, and then getting out of the city.
Did they say where he's meeting the chopper?
No, so we're going to have to watch for it. I'll meet you on the rooftop above the bunker at 8 o'clock.
Chuck gives Katie Zombrex and she loses consciousness. Stacy brings up what happened to Isabella and Frank in the first game, saying that Isabella was researching a real antidote.
There's talk of finding a cure someday. Isabella Keyes was looking for it.
Wasn't she one of the terrorists in Willamette?
No, her brother was the terrorist. He was angry, taking revenge for a government experiment that caused all of this in the first place. Isabella tried to help. She worked with Frank West to make the first inhibitor, using Queens.
Well, I hope she's still looking.
Chuck meets Rebecca for the stakeout and they find the helicopter TK plans to escape in. Chuck manages to take the helicopter down and TK is knocked out from its crash. They bring him back to the safe house and Chuck brings Sullivan up to speed. Stacy informs Chuck that the military will come to the safe house and rescue any survivors.
She's gonna need one last dose of Zombrex before the military gets here.
Once the military does get here though, something new happens. This gas comes through the vents, doing something to some of the zombies, making them stronger.
Come on! Drop, you son of a bitch! Come on! Oh, my face! Oh, God, it burns! It burns! Oh! Hold still, man! I'll shoot it off!
These new types of zombies wipe out the reserve, but Sullivan says there will most likely be another attempt for the military to come and rescue them in 24 hours.
If it looks like there's any survivors.
What do you mean, your understanding? You knew plenty about standard operating procedure before.
Hey, hold on, Missy. Wasn't supposed to happen like this. I'm the only reserve man who made it here alive. And I'm doing my damnedest.
And what if that rescue fails? Huh? Everything else has gone wrong so far.
Firebombing. It's the only way to get rid of them. For good.
They also see Rebecca through the camera near the dying reserve, so Chuck goes out to look for her. He finds her captive by a leader of the defeated squad who's gone completely batshit.
I'm out! Curtis, give me your weapon! You want some of this?
After defeating him, they go back to the safe house. TK implies he knows something about the gas that changed the zombies. He also tells Chuck that it wasn't his choice to frame him, but won't tell who gave him the order. While they leave TK captive in that room, they're talking about where the gas could be coming from. But suddenly, zombies have breached the safe house.
The door! It's been breached! I've got to hotwire that panel. Stay here. Barricade the door.
Sullivan is supposed to be at post, but he's suddenly gone. TK also seems to be free, but shortly gets bitten. Sullivan was apparently knocked out and TK begs Chuck to get him Zombrex.
Man, you gotta help me. How long does he have?
I don't think we'll know until he turns, Chuck.
Whether you do or don't determines if you get ending A or overtime mode. We'll keep going as if we're getting ending A since that's actually the canonical ending. So, no Zombrex for Kanye. According to the news, there won't be another rescue attempt due to the recent zombie mutations. They were also lied to about the safe house, claiming a rescue team entered it and found nobody alive. Rebecca thinks of a way to contact her station and rescue them while they try to figure out the sources of this gas mutation.
Happening so fast. The gas. It looks like it's coming from underground.
And that's where we'll find out more.
Chuck heads over to the underground tunnels. Upon finding entry to a lab, he notices zombies heading towards this spinning contraption that seems to be attracting them. There are mercenaries using the device to create high-frequency noise that instantly kill the zombies and harvest the queen wasps that emerge from them. Chuck heads to an office to find two researchers, kills them, and learns that Phenotrans, the company behind Zombrex, is running this lab and controlling the gas. He takes their laptop that will hopefully have more info on what's going on. On the laptop, Rebecca finds the evidence and comes to the conclusion that Phenotrans is causing this outbreak to jack up Zombrex sales, which were declining before.
Okay, so listen to me. So, you're saying that Phenotrans killed all these people to drive up their goddamn stock price?
This is just crazy.
We have to get this information out. We have to take these bastards down. I found this down there too.
I'll call my station. They'll send help.
As soon as Rebecca calls her station, blam!
What the hell?
Convincing reaction. So it turns out Sullivan works for Phenotrans. He reveals that Chuck was supposed to die during the outbreak, but he knows how to cover up this whole thing as well as killing them. Stacy intervenes, which causes Sullivan to make a run for it. Chuck immediately pursues him. He catches up with Sullivan, which, like all cliches, leads to some dramatic dialogue.
Whatever happened to do no harm, Sullivan?
Open your eyes, Chuck. Do you have any idea how many people are affected in this country? Doctors, politicians, CEOs. Some of our country's best are infected. Even your little girl, Chuck. What would happen to your cute little time bomb if she didn't get her drug? Fortune City was a small price to pay to ensure our country's way of life.
You murdered these people!
Acceptable losses. This wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last.
You bastard! You did it! You caused the Vegas outbreak too, didn't you? You killed my wife, destroyed my family!
Everything that we have done has been absolutely necessary!
But after that, it's fight time. Once Chuck defeats Sullivan, his plane ride is here. But once the plane ride comes to snatch him off, Chuck hooks his lower body to the latch near him, splitting Sullivan in half and creating the best death in the series. I guess Chuck meant what he said before.
Don't worry. He's not making it out of here in one piece.
Chuck uses the radio to call for a ride. Stacy and Katie catch up when the helicopter reaches them, but Chuck goes for her drop backpack. As soon as he does, another cliche moment happens. TK Zombie comes out of nowhere and gets a hold of him. He tells Stacy to go without him, leaving Chuck surrounded by zombos. What's his fate? That's ending A, but let's look at it if we were to pursue ending S instead, which leads to overtime mode.
Oh!
My daughter takes this better than you.
Now, if Chuck gave TK the Zombrex before the Sullivan fight, Stacy and Katie would be missing when the rescue chopper comes. He goes back to the safe room only to find Katie's backpack and nothing else. As Chuck is looking through the security cameras, TK is on the radio telling Chuck that he has Stacy and Katie held hostage.
Shut up!
You son of a bitch. If you hurt them, you ready for overtime, Chucky?
It's the best part of the show!
TK demands that Chuck gets him certain items across the mall and to meet him at the TIR arena, only to get snuck up on and knocked out. When Chuck comes to, he's hanging upside down and sees Katie and Stacy tied up, being lowered down to a horde of zombies. Chuck breaks free and tries to help, but TK attacks him. Final boss battle time. Once Chuck defeats TK, he puts up one more struggle, but only sets himself up to get tossed over the bottom floor. After that, Chuck rescues Stacy and Katie. They all live happily ever after. Probably. That's ending S. There's 5 other endings as well. Katie dies and everything sucks. Katie dies and everything sucks. You get captured and everything sucks. You die and everything sucks. And everybody dies and everything sucks. So how did Dead Rising 2 turn out for me? Well, it was certainly a lot different from the first title. It really feels like it was built from the ground up. It does not use the MC Framework engine like the first game, but rather its own unnamed engine that Blue Castle claims was made exclusively for Dead Rising 2. While a lot of the gameplay is still there, and it's pretty damn enjoyable, there's just something about it that feels slower? I don't know, I might be crazy, but I feel like if you look at it side to side, you can notice a serious change of pace. The frame rate being turned down a few notches doesn't help either. Bosses this time around, even with broken weapons like the Defiler, are tougher. They seem more responsive. This is probably due to the improved AI system, and some of them have attacks that do an awful lot of damage. Co-op was a real treat. A half hour into Dead Rising back in 2006, my only thought was how perfect the game would be if there was co-op. So it's good that they delivered on that. The competitive aspect that comes from TIR is fun too. It's satisfying when you destroy your opponents with obstacles, and this is coming from someone that doesn't really have a competitive spirit when it comes to playing online. Combining weapons was a great concept and mostly well implemented. The only thing that's annoying is having to find a workbench in order to combine them. But even so, there were really cool combinations that only made the game even more enjoyable. However, I want to express my disappointment in the lack of ugly people. I liked that in the first game because it felt like the developers and designers were going for a more realistic approach. In this one, all the main characters either look fine or just slamming as all hell. And I'll be damned if someone says Chuck's facial appearance was not inspired by Clint Eastwood. Also, this is a Las Vegas parody location. Why was there no Penn and Teller spoof boss using tricks, magic, and whatnot to fight? That would have been awesome. Those performers we got instead were just lame. So yeah, a few faults aside, this was a very good entry with interesting new ideas and does a good job expanding the story. Selling nearly 3 million copies across all platforms, it was a big hit. Of course, there would be one more piece that expands the story even further. Case West was released exclusively for Xbox 360 in December of 2010, 2 months after Dead Rising 2, and not as a DLC chapter, but as a standalone Xbox Live Arcade game. The core gameplay is identical to Dead Rising 2, but there's some key differences. For one, single player or co-op, you always have Frank as your partner. He has infinite health and an endless supply of baseball bats when he is not controlled by another human player. Also, whenever you help survivors out, you don't take them to a safe house, they just go do their own thing. So yeah, no escorting at all. With Frank's return, he also has some of his signature moves that Chuck never learned, such as somersault kick and disembowel. There are also some new weapon combinations that did not appear in the second game. And, just like Case Zero, there's only one boss. And oh boy, how did Capcom not receive shit after this? Make way for another blatant stereotype, complete with this kind of music. The story really opens up opportunities for further entries as well. It goes as such. During Ending A from Dead Rising 2, Frank appears out of nowhere and kills a TK zombie, sporting a pair of shades and even Carlito's necklace.
You look familiar. Hey, you must be...
Hey, you're the one who's all over the TV.
Frank immediately recognizes Chuck from the news. While hesitant to trust him, he gives Chuck a chance. Chuck reiterates that he was framed for causing the Fortune City outbreak and that Rebecca Chang was killed off for trying to help him, who Frank actually knew apparently. Frank's reason for coming was actually to pick up Rebecca so they can sneak into Phenotran's facility, so he decides to have Chuck tag along since he obviously has a score to settle with them. Also, you see Frank was never able to get rid of his disease completely.
And the name's Frank. Frank West.
They manage to infiltrate the facility and make it to the shipping office where Frank contacts his source that works for Phenotrans. The source promises evidence for Frank and Chuck. Chuck really loses his patience though, since he still doesn't have evidence that will clear his name. The source sympathizes with Chuck, saying that he wants to take Phenotrans down just as much. The source leads them to evidence that'll clear Chuck's name, so they head over to the director's observatory.
Record of missing persons reports? This is a list of prisoners, Chuck. What the hell?
Blueprints of Fortune City's underground. A harvest projection. I saw it all back in Fortune City. They need queens to make Zombrex.
Over there, Frank and Chuck learn that the Zombrex is still developed through Queen Wasps, which is why Phenotrans spreads the infection still. When they get back to speak to the source, he tells them that he's locked in the security labs and needs to figure a way out. The duo get impatient, and Frank hates pens apparently.
know, you're a little high-strung for a guy who's covered wars.
The source states that he needs their help getting the doors open for them to meet. They devise a plan to get some C4s and blow the doors open. Entering the lab, they find out their source was actually Isabella. I mean, I guess it's not that surprising. Who did you think it would be? Otis? She seems really happy to see Frank, but he's pissed off since she works for Phenotrans. Isabella explains, though, that she's been trying to come up with a cure this entire time.
I've tried to make a synthetic. They stole my work. I have been working on a cure. I was so close.
This mysterious woman who looks infected intervenes with armed forces.
Don't give me that bullshit. You don't care about lives.
Everything we do here is for the greater good. You all rely on us. No one would stop us, even if they knew.
Isabella breaks away and helps them, but soon after, this Middle Eastern-looking guts man knocks her out. She gets carried off to the lady upstairs. After defeating Gutsman, Marion, the lady in the wheelchair, reveals she created an antidote for infection, but has only used it on herself. Her logic for not providing the antidote to others is that she feels the zombies are a way of mankind being punished. But I'm sure profiting off of Zombrex is another reason as well. She then arms the lab with a self-destruct sequence, then leaves.
No, we can't leave. I need to find that cure for my daughter. It's too late. We gotta go. Now!
Escaping the building, Chuck and Frank are full of remorse. They lost the possible cure for the virus. It ends on a somewhat positive note either way, though.
My Zombrex, I left it back in the... Take it. The world needs Frank West.
And that's it. We also receive a funny little outro as well. So while ending S for the first game was a canonical ending for the franchise, you will later see that it does not seem to be the case for Dead Rising 2. Capcom has officially stated that ending S is a canonical ending, but ending A is what leads to Case West. Along with that, Dead Rising 3's story would use elements that refer to specific events that occurred in Case West during its canon, which we will look into later. For now, let's wrap up Case West. This was a really cool extra worth $10 and adds more to the already expansive Dead Rising story while leaving a few windows open for potential installments. Of course, what we would get next is not a new installment, but rather a remake? April of 2011, about 7 months after Dead Rising 2's release, Capcom revealed a remake, or reimagining, or who fucking cares, of Dead Rising 2.
The Fortune City incident. People always ask me about it.
Capcom is no stranger to the idea of re-releasing games in this manner, where things have changed or are updated. And I suppose it shouldn't be surprising that they try to give Dead Rising this treatment after the second game's success. Since the gameplay is almost exactly like Dead Rising 2, and the story is only partially changed, save for most dialogue, this won't be a big part. At this point, Blue Castle Games would be bought by Capcom and renamed Capcom Vancouver. This would be the first Dead Rising game after Inafune leaving the company to start his own. They didn't show a whole lot at first, only giving you the basic concept. Frank is telling a story about if he was the one inside Fortune City instead of Chuck.
Famous. The next question people always ask is, well, if you'd been there, what would you have done differently? My answer... everything.
Later on, they would reveal another trailer showing off a brand new area added to Fortune City known as Uranus Zone.
I'm going to Uranus Zone! Hello?
It's a big old theme park with a sci-fi space theme, complete with rides, minigames, and its own slew of stores. They also added a checkpoint system. Whenever you entered a different area, you reach a checkpoint. If you die or mess something up in the area, you can simply revert to the checkpoint. It's convenient, but really takes something out of the game. You don't feel that sense of worry when you're low on health and haven't saved in a while, which is something I always do. Or when your survivors might be in trouble, just revert and try again. There's also safety deposit keys you can find scattered across Fortune City. In Uranus Zone, there's a bank with a big safe. This is where you use the keys, and deposit boxes can have all different kinds of items, even Zombrex. Speaking of Zombrex, you apply a dose of it to yourself instead of Katie, and you can do it anywhere. Photography is back, of course, and you can even take selfies with zombies.
Like it.
They also added a damage scale for the bosses, a mechanic normally in fighting games. Basically, it means you attack them more than once with the same move immediately, it won't do nearly as much damage as the first time. This is good, it makes them more difficult and the fights last much longer. The game also has 3 new bosses. Chuck, the original protagonist who actually replaces Leon Bell from Dead Rising 2. In this universe, things don't go so well for him, and oh my god, did I feel terrible the first time I encountered him. Evan McIntyre, Adam the Clown's brother. That's pretty awesome, since Adam was my favorite boss in the first game. The fight itself is fun enough, but Evan's theme sucks. Adam's was this badass mix that used some cool samplings. Evan's is just generic circus. And lastly, Stacy replacing Sullivan. As you'll see in a bit, one significant change in the story is that Stacy is the one that betrays the main characters and becomes a boss. Her boss fight was pretty unique too, takes me back to more classic 3D style bosses. In co-op, player 2 plays as Chuck, complete with his Dead Rising 2 moveset. So that's pretty cool, it forces both players to actually play differently since they have movesets unique to each other. Terra's Reality multiplayer has been removed. Instead, there is a Sandbox mode. Sandbox mode is similar to Infinity mode, but it has some differences. You don't gradually lose health over time, health ups respawn, and you can save. There's also a bunch of challenges sprawled across the map you can do to earn extra PP and cash. TIR was a very easy way to earn cash for the campaign, but at least they tried to compensate by making it easier to find higher volumes of cash, as well as Sandbox mode challenges. Frank also comments on nearly everything, from entering stores to defeating bosses and helping survivors. It's pretty neat and just adds more to his personality.
That's hot.
Okay, this is a really bad time to be slow and stumbling. You may be good at video games, but this is real life.
Woohoo.
Sometimes hack and slash is better than stealth. You are much nicer than the last female cop I met.
As for the story, I'll just go over the key differences by switching back and forth between the two games. I'll refer to Dead Rising 2 as Vanilla, and Off the Record as OTR. Vanilla. Chuck was part of Terra's Reality to raise money for his daughter's Zombrex supply. OTR. Frank was part of TIR because his fame was going down the tubes. Vanilla. Chuck was mysteriously framed for causing the outbreak. OTR. Brandon, one of the bosses in the game, was bribed by TK to cause the outbreak. Vanilla. When the gang finds enough evidence that Phenotrans is behind it all, Sullivan kills Rebecca and escapes from the safe room. OTR. When they find the evidence they needed, Stacy shoots Rebecca but leaves her alive, meanwhile killing Sullivan, who helps you out before he dies. Vanilla. Chuck pursues Sullivan and makes him meet his end on top of Fortune City Hotel. OTR. Frank destroys the Harvesters and pursues Stacy to her Uranus zone, ultimately defeating her. Vanilla. TK has Katie and Stacy held hostage. OTR. TK has Rebecca held hostage. There's a lot of changes in the dialogue, most noticeably during boss encounters. He can deliver lines just as lame as Chuck.
I saw what you did there.
Oh, should have saw that coming.
Oh, and all the Playboy ads were replaced with Uranus Zone ads. There's a concept art section that shows some of the ideas that never panned out for the first title as well. Always cool to see. And that's pretty much Off the Record. A strange, almost unnecessary reimagining of Dead Rising 2 that is not canonical in any way, shape, or form. Some of you may say this was nothing but pure fan service, that it's just Capcom re-releasing the same game but with a few things changed to make Frank beggars buy it. Well, you'd be right. Don't get me wrong, this was cool and all, and a lot of the dialogue and a couple story arcs were heavily altered, but is it really worth $40 when you already bought the original Dead Rising 2? Never mind the cut content, this just doesn't feel fresh enough for me to fully appreciate. All that aside, I couldn't help but enjoy Frank from beginning to end. It was cool seeing him star in another full game.